Do you know what? I have so many questions about the last 5 minutes there, and in my head, I'm going, the tag for this entire video would be Simon Lewis says do nothing. And you're very welcome along to the CESI Staffroom. The CESI Staffroom aims to be a 30-minute program by teachers for teachers. The content is picked by you, so if you have any ideas you want us to put forward on the CESI Staffroom, please give us a shout. Joined today, I'm delighted to say we're joined today by Simon Lewis. Simon, will you introduce yourself there?
Yeah, no problem. And thanks, Hassan, for having me on the podcast. I think this is an amazingly brilliant idea from CESI. If you don't mind me saying, I think it's something that I am very, very glad to see. Just introduce myself. I am Simon Lewis. I'm the principal of Carlow Educate Together in Carlow Town. And I've been a member of CESI since I qualified as a teacher back in 2002, 2003, roughly that year, and possibly before that, actually. I've have my background is in technology. I qualified as a computer scientist in 2001, just in time for the dot-com bubble to burst. So I found myself with no job and became a teacher by accident, I like to say. And it was a very, very happy accident because it's the career I should have gone for in the first place. But I'm very, very glad that I have the technology side of it to back me up. I suppose people might know me best for my work with Onshotnet, which is a blog that's been running for about 15 years, maybe a little more. And I'm also I'm involved in several other projects. And would have done a lot of teacher training for various organisations. So,
Simon, talk to us about Onshotnet.
Yeah, no problem at all. Like any good project, I think Onshotnet was born out of immense frustration and anger and want for revenge. So basically, I really was very at the time. I qualified a few years before, and I did my qualifications not in Ireland, but in the UK, where technology and education was quite mature, and basically in Ireland it wasn't the case, and I had discovered this amazing tool that wasn't in Irish classrooms called an interactive whiteboard, and I was so frustrated because because I felt it was one of the greatest things I'd ever seen, and I couldn't get across at any of my training or any of my thing that this would be a good idea. And anyway, 2008 came and everything changed, and I decided what I would do is I would use my time to independently review every single interactive whiteboard that was available in Ireland. And at its peak, I think there were 56 different companies offering 20 varieties of interactive whiteboard, and I had made reviews of all of them. And I think really that's where Onshot started in a way. And then just over time, I suppose it's gone through several incarnations, and I suppose it became a regular technology blog when blogging became a thing, and then it expanded into general education stuff. And I suppose the main thing was really I wanted I suppose and to give a sort of independent voice outside of the various organizations of what I was using technology for in education. And then I suppose it expanded into my own thoughts around the education system as I sort of matured into my job, and maybe was seeing things that I guess I felt could use a little improvement within the system.
When it comes to technology and education, the person presenting the product tends to be the person selling the product, which is this coming from the salesperson. Like I was that salesperson, so I do know. And when I got out of it, the sales game, if you like, and I started, I don't know what you call it, is what I do, turning stuff off and back on again. When I got into that, I remember going to a school presenting this platform that I had just seen, and I just, oh my God, this is amazing, and they do a thing and it's for free. And the principal said, yeah, but what are they selling? And I said, no, they're not selling. It's for free. And they went. He innocently looked at me and he went, or laughed at my innocence perhaps, and just went, no, they're selling something. Remember your day. And sure enough, when I drilled down into it, I'm not going to mention the platform, but that was it. There was a sales pitch at the end of it.
Mm.
Education has been the one thing where I'm struggling to find somebody who's not selling something, who's not selling a particular product. Is that something you found, finding that independent, that witch voice, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, everyone who develops anything needs to make a living. So, unless your main job isn't making products, then you're clearly going to be selling them. So I guess you're going to be biased towards a particular thing. And I've tried my best over the last 20 years or so, never to sell my soul to a particular platform, let's say. And while there's some platforms I feel that do things better and while I've done training in all the various the various kind of companies, whatever you call them, they have these. You become a such and such evangelist, or you become or innovator, or whatever. I mean, I do those courses not because I'm particularly loyal to them, and I've been ambassador for particular apps, not because I particularly I want to sell them or I want to help, but because I think they're good. So I don't know how successfully I've done that, but ultimately, I've always tried to be I've always aimed to be like I am in everything in life, agnostic to any particular company or any particular device. And I feel like even in my own personal use of things, I'm talking to you on a Mac beside my Android phone, and I'm sure I have something Microsoft, and I'm probably wearing a Microsoft something.
Let's not get our nerd on too much right now. Let's move on to the teaching. That you're a principal, so as well as doing all of that, you're also a principal. How are you finding things at the minute?
Yeah, right now things are it's well, to someone who really likes computers, apart from all the I suppose shock and all the various and the overwhelming nature of what's happening right now, if you take all that aside, I'm actually quite excited by what this can mean for education. I think there's lots and lots of things that we weren't doing before because we didn't have to, and now we have to because there's no other way of doing them. If that's not the worst sentence you've ever heard in your life. So I'm so to put some meat onto that sentence, I'm kind of interested in how communication has to happen. I'm interested in platforms that are going to be that have had to be adapted. I'm interested in how video is now becoming a kind of a very, very interesting platform that was totally underutilized before the pandemic, and now is almost seen as an essential, and is becoming as an essential. But as a school leader, as a principal, my job has been, I suppose, less about. It's all been about. I suppose it's been more about reassurance and looking after people from far away and trying to figure out ways to do that, and bringing people along this new path where we've basically turned every school in the country from an completely offline entity, or more or less a completely offline entity, into a completely online entity. And that's a really, really tough struggle for most schools, whether or not they were technology advanced or not. And I mean, the main point I've been kind of driving home to other school leaders is number one, to accept that this is a crazy time, and take a breath, and don't worry about technology, don't worry about anything, figure out where. And because I suppose the first thing that happened when the schools were told to shut down was every company in the world started offering their services for free, and it became too overwhelming. It was so overwhelming you couldn't make a choice to do anything. So I felt I did nothing for about a week in terms of choices, and I spent the time kind of telling my staff, let's relax and figure out what's going to happen. Let's wait for other people to tell us what to do, and then we can kind of figure out where to go from there. And once we did that, I suppose when the air cleared, the next step was to kind of say, what are we already doing, and is this enough? And we found that it was. And then I found when I talked to other principals, everyone was actually doing something regarding technology and education. and it didn't matter what that was. And my advice to people then was, whatever you're doing, stick to it and don't do anything new.
When this came about, did you find you had to slow down to bring everybody else on board? Because as a technologist, you're on a different part of the curve as regards using technology in the classroom. So some of your teachers mightn't be on the same part of the curve as you are. Did you find yourself you were holding or pulling back to bring everybody on board to move forward, or did you just truck on through?
No, I mean, I suppose I became, very excited about the prospect of introducing, lots of stuff, and that might be useful. But I'm always conscious. Anytime I think of something, I kind of have this sit in my hands kind of thing before I do put them to the keyboard and think, okay, this might be a good idea, might be a terrible idea, but how can we make this as easy as possible for everybody to do? So I kind of thought of the tools that people are already comfortable with, such as, for example, the first thing I did was, we were told to shut down on Thursday, and on Friday morning I created a collaborative open Google Doc, which anyone could fill out with websites they found useful. And I just divide them up into different subjects in the primary level. And I realized I knew people would be able to do that. So that kind of, in a way, satiated some sort of my addiction to doing something,
Yeah.
Let's say, and that sounds a bit cocky, but I don't mean it that way. I needed to do something, that was my thing to do. And then after that, I felt, okay, I can certainly see what my staff are at. So the second thing I did was I decided I'd have a meeting with the staff and find out how they were feeling, what were they already using, what were they already comfortable with, and from that meeting, I mean, I can credit my staff for basically everything that's happened since. Was when I felt their temperature, I realized that everybody was overwhelmed, and really the key thing was, before anybody did anything, it was we needed to, the way, it's just the timing of it was very, very interesting, that we had a couple of weeks before, let's say, the spring break or the Easter break, and that was a good time. I felt my suggestion was to people was just do nothing new, play around, send stuff off enough to cover people for a couple of weeks, and then spend those couple of weeks just looking around and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and don't just be ignoring all the various free offers and everything else, and find something that suits you. And I came up with this sort of 6-step kind of plan for any school leader, in terms of what they might what they might do if they were,
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, no problem at all. I mean, step one was take a breath. I mean, like a lot of the steps were take a breath or don't worry and stuff like that. But take a breath is number one. Number two is audit what you already do using technology. How do you already communicate with and then divide that up into your staff, your pupils, your parents, and very quickly you realize that everyone is using technology in some way, whether that's sending text messages, that is a form of technology. If you are sending message by text, that is a way to communicate. You might have been using an MIS like Aladdin or Database or one of those sort of things, and that's another way that people are communicating. But some people were ahead of that. Maybe people were using email to communicate. Some people were using and some people were maybe using Seesaw or Class Dojo, and then some people maybe using Google Classroom. So people were using quite a lot of stuff without realizing they were using quite a lot of stuff. And that was, and I think once people did that, the next stage was, now accept, don't do anything new. And this is my of all the 6 steps, this is the one that I thought was the most important. And I said, do nothing new, accept. And the accept was number 4, which was maybe try and embrace video. Because, and the reason I said this quite early really was, the week after we closed down, I decided I'd do an assembly with the school, a virtual assembly. So basically a week after we'd shut down. And I just remember doing, kind of going, well, look, if people show up, they show up, and so on. And then they all did. There was 160 children, sets of children, 160 families on my screen, and I realized, gosh, this is important. It was very emotional because when I thought about it, I hadn't actually seen anyone outside of my house for a week. And I think that was the same for quite a lot of other families. And it was the first time I felt a human connection, let's say, with people outside of my family. And it was a deal breaker for me. And I did a little research after it, and apparently our brains, when we're looking at someone on the screen, we feel like we're in the same room. I think anyone who's been to a Zoom wine party, and I found this kind of interesting when I had my very first Zoom wine party or whatever it was. I was actually technically drinking on my own, which is not a good thing.
No.
And in some ways having that kind of weird situation that I do feel I'm actually talking to you in the same room, Hassan, and I felt actually that if you map that onto education, I think one of the most important things we can do as teachers and as school leaders is to have that human connection. And that's the closest we can get right now while we're all, locked in, let's say, to our houses. So I said I put that down as one of my other steps. And then after that, it was really just, looking after yourself. And then, and basically, always remember, this is out of your control. And I think if of the 2 points, really, the apart from video, realizing this is out of our control and we can only do so much was the second, which has nothing to do with technology. That's just really looking after yourself and realizing, this is where we are.
Do you know what? I have so many questions about the last 5 minutes there, and in my head I'm going, the tag for this entire video would be Simon Lewis says do nothing. No, that is really nice. There's one thing the take a breath. I think that is so important. Like that Thursday, I think everybody knows where they were that Thursday at when the announcement was made. I was sitting in a staff room. There was rapturous applause from the students in the secondary school when the announcement was made. Yeah. And then people thought about it. And by the time the day was breaking, all of a sudden the fear started to creep in. What are we going to do? But how do we do this? Now, the staff room I was in at the time are already knee deep in a platform that they use quite successfully, and they don't have an issue with it. So I couldn't be the one to say, you're just stripping away the walls. You're doing exactly what you're doing, but now you're doing it online. Mm-hmm. They had to realize that themselves. And I think the ones that realized it best and quickest were the ones that went, all right, stop, breathe, and how are we going to move forward? I like the point you made about do an audit on what technology you're already using, what technology your school already uses. What has been the pushback that you've had to deal with?
I suppose I know every school leader has to say, they have a wonderful staff and everything else, but I actually do have a really, really wonderful staff who are open to all my crazy ideas. I come up with ridiculous ideas, a lot of the time, and they go with me. They come up with brilliant ideas, and I go with them. So I suppose there's a kind of a nice thing, a nice relationship going there, that we trust each other as a staff. We actually get on really, really well, and I'm very proud of that fact. That's a relationship we've built over the 12 years we've been open, and we're so I suppose in some ways I don't have a culture of pushback, which is good. However, obviously there's always going to be some sort of and I don't mean pushback in a negative sense, but people may be struggling in terms of being able to do certain things, or may not be as confident in certain things. And I guess I wouldn't call it pushback particularly, but I think I kind of think there might be it's bringing people along a journey. And the say of doing things a certain way and then doing them in a different way, and that can take some people a little bit longer. And I think when people get frustrated with technology, they're less patient than they would be if it wasn't technology. so this isn't working, I'm giving up, I'm moving on to something else. Whereas if it was like not technology, then it wouldn't be as much of a, you find ways around it.
When I see you, my brain tells me that I'm in the same room as you. And this is a bit anecdotal, but I got a bit emotional when you were saying that, because I remember my nephew in the States. They're going through exactly what we're going through. Same thing, lockdown, schools shut. Slightly different dynamic as regards parents buying devices and funding and that. Pushing that aside, when my nephew saw his teacher for the first time in 2 weeks on a Zoom or whatever they were using, Google Classroom, he started crying because that was his first connection with somebody he's with 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, gone. Pushback is the wrong word. It's what problems are you coming across, or what problems are you having to solve?
Okay, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think access is one that people keep bringing up a lot. Not in terms of my staff, but just generally in the country. When I'm talking to other principals, I'm talking to other organisations. That there's this thing around I don't have access to technology in order to be able to do anything, or my or Wi-Fi is bad, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of actually I wouldn't say 9 times out of 10. A lot of the time, people do have access but don't realize they have access, if that makes sense. And
okay.
find having a mobile phone is I'm sorry if there's background noise.
Not at all. No, it's deadly. It's good to hear.
That's okay. My son is going to bed and he's resisting such a sorry about that.
Not at all.
What was I saying there? Yeah, I feel that many people don't realize they have they actually do have they do have access and they realize it, but there are genuine cases, so it's bringing people along that journey. I also find actually a lot of my problems are nothing to do with technology, and they can be mainly social issues, such as whether families are being fed or have enough food. We're a DESH school, so we would we would have had to give 20% of our parents have applied for the emergency school meals that are going out, and I would imagine more than double of that really needed it. But we're trying to access people who are hard to access, and that's been a problem. That's been a kind of a little problem. And in the middle of that, I suppose, is people who've gone AWOL, and we're a little bit worried, that while the majority of our families have checked in because we have a very good system in place for if we don't see people. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, we do every teacher in my school posts up work or posts up messages and does a weekly meeting with their class to check in. There'll be some families who we haven't seen since we've closed, which is a long time, 6 weeks. And every week on a Friday, I ask the staff, if you haven't seen a particular child or you haven't heard from a particular child for the week, please fill in. We have a Google form which I get them to fill in. That goes onto a spreadsheet, and I have my homeschool liaison teacher and my school completion program project worker, and they try and contact families. And 9 times out of 10, they'll get a response, and they'll phone them and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're here. We're just very busy," or whatever it is. But we have maybe a small number of families. We don't know where they are, and that's something I'm worried about. Let's say right now.
And how do you deal with that? There's no other way to ask that question. I was struggling in my mind how do you deal with that scenario, that situation?
Yeah, I mean, we're at the moment we're just ringing and in less with fewer days between, and leaving message saying, look, we're only ringing you to see if you're okay. We're not after anything, and look, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm talking about like less than 5 children here, but out of 375, but it's. They're the ones I want to get those 5 at least to know that they're okay. And then you've got the wider circle of children around accessing technology, which is a higher number. But I'm not worried about them because they've told us, look, we're okay, we're healthy, we're eating, and look, we're trying to do our best with the technology. Look, we've 5 children in the house. We've one doing the Leaving Cert. He's got the laptop, and so on. Our plan now is obviously whenever we get access to the school again, to be able to lend laptops out to families where they would like to access things but just don't have enough devices or whatever it might be.
Simon, what does your day look like?
Right now, I actually have somewhat of a structure to the day, because I think it's important, but it's not a structure I quite like at the moment.
Okay.
I'm busy. I keep saying I'm absolutely knackered. I'm working much longer hours than I was before this, but that's probably because I'm juggling family life with work life, and then also I'm spending a bit of time, I suppose, trying to. I guess this is an area which I have somewhat of an expertise in. So I feel I'm spending a bit of time answering lots of questions from other schools, other principals, and hosting webinars, hosting events, and that. So that's kind of a new thing that's in my area. And then stupidly, I set up another project as soon as it started. So basically, my day. This is my day. My day is I wake up. I am woken up. Sorry, at 7 o'clock by my son. He wakes up at 7, and he does not let us not stay asleep. And from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, we kind of keep it leisurely. We have our breakfast. We go for a walk, and basically my work day kind of starts around 9:30. Roz and my wife, we're both teachers. We have taken in turns for one of us to teach Emrys, who's our son, on alternate days. So you'll be doing a maximum of 3 days of teaching a week, and we give him an hour of teaching. So that's generally gets us to about 10:30, 11. We've had him set up on a couple of apps. This is very unlike us. We didn't let him use the computer before this has happened.
Right.
And basically he has two things he does. It's a reading program called Raz Kids, which is free for anybody who wants it at the moment during this thing. And we also use Mathletics, which is a commercial program which we have him set up on. And he does that for about 45 minutes. Then we have lunch. Then I do some exercise. Then I get stuck into schoolwork for a few hours, and then we have dinner, and then Roz and I make sure that we spend a bit of time in the evening. Roz will go to bed about 9:30, 10, and then I work till about midnight, and then my day starts all over again.
So you're saying, what does your school day? So you've mixed in you've told us the family day. Simon Lewis, dad, gets up, does work, teaches child, does exercise, goes to bed. Simon Lewis, principal, what's his day like?
So my day is about, I would say, 8 to 10 hours of work, of principal work. When I wake up in the morning, first thing I do after doing my morning hellos is to answer any emails, answer any messages I can do quickly. The quick ones, the ones you can fire off in a couple of minutes. And I go through all those. There's emails that I get which I need a bit more time to do, and that's fine. That's all done. And then I'm usually around 11 o'clock is usually my time where I'm doing things where I'm on video, where I'm talking to, whether that's a meeting with my management team, whether that's the staff meeting, whether that's talking to talking to a parent online. I've had to have parent meetings because at the moment we're enrolling children for September, so sometimes if there's a child with additional needs, I'll have to talk. Essentially from that space, those 2 hours, I'm usually on video, and then after lunch, it's a continuation of some of the bigger things. I try to do one major thing a day, but it's bitty. I don't get a big run at anything, so my day is kind of involved in bitty bits. And then I suppose where I try and get that time from about 10 o'clock till midnight is generally wrapping up things or planning for the next day.
I'm going to mention something that you highlighted to me on Twitter. So this is an article from I can't remember off the top of my head. Apart from TDs, there are another very silent group of paid civil servants, primary school teachers. The vast majority are not working and are expecting to have the whole summer off. Why are the why are they not required to do more for the national cause? Now, you just gave us 10 hours of work.
Yeah.
So, what? I mean, what's your first reaction when you read something like that?
Oh, I laugh. I don't take those things very seriously. To be honest with you, I get that most people think teachers are we work part-time jobs together. We get 6 months off a year. I mean, we get. I've been hearing that for 20 years. I mean, all of that is just nonsense. I always compare teaching to acting, in a way that you're on stage every day, 5 days a week for 5 hours and 40 minutes, and but the problem with the difference between you and an actor is that that you have to write your own script. Half of your audience might not want to be there to watch you, and you also have to be the security as well as the actor, so you have to manage the behaviors as well. So there's all that. But then as well in your job, I mean, in a more serious way, you're not just a teacher these days. The job has changed dramatically in the last couple of decades since I started, and it's become more of a social. You're not a psychologist, obviously, but you're dealing with a lot more social stuff than we would have done in the past. And the actual academics of teaching at a primary level it's the gap between that and the non-academic stuff is narrowing in terms of workload.
How do you think we're going to come out of this, Simon? So I'll wrap up by asking this. When this is done and dusted, and we're out the other side, and we will get out the other side, and we'll be better off it because we're humans, and that's what humans do. We adapt, we overcome. When we get out the other side, how do you think the reflective process is going to take place? Are we going to get together and learn from what the last 6 months was about, or the last 4 months? Or are we going to kick down that school door and go, thank God that's over, back to it?
Yeah, one thing I've learned in my 20 years is that we're very change resistant as a sort of a profession, and very conservative, and I'm not saying this is criticism; it's just an observation that I have, but we've been, like if we do, I think it's very, when you're in the middle of a pandemic, you think, gosh, everything's going to change and it's going to be brilliant when this is finished, because we'll all have learned so much from this, and we should learn a lot from this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of great stuff that's coming out of this, in terms of new skill sets that people are establishing, and all that. However, like if I look at another crisis in education, which I can summarize in 2 words, called the Leaving Cert, I think the Leaving Cert is the most awful thing in the Irish education system. It's a rudimentary, horrible tool that we've been trying to get rid of for 30 years, and all we've been doing by trying to get rid of it is making it worse and worse all the time by trying to tinker with it. And I think what we do in the Irish education system, I always compare the Irish education system to Christmas decorations. You put them, a crisis happens, and you try and solve that crisis, and you can never really untangle Christmas decorations that well, so you kind of do well enough, and you untangle bits of it, and then you go, I'll throw the rest of the lights in the tree, it'll be grand. And then the crisis is over, you shove everything back in the box, and ultimately you've actually made the Christmas decorations even more tangled by the end of it. And so I have a bad feeling, to be honest with you. What I think will happen is we will kind of go, right, let's get back to normal. And maybe a couple of good things will happen. And I mean, I don't want to be completely skeptical. I don't see system-wide changes happening as a result of it, unless this goes on for years. If it goes on for years, maybe it will, and maybe that will happen. The only thing I can see happening is that when we're interviewing for candidates for jobs, we might consider using video instead of forcing people to come to the interview. But outside of that, maybe people will continue using things like Class Dojo or Seesaw for giving their homework out. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. And finally, as I know I said I was going to finish on this, but just when you mentioned the Leaving Cert, not really. It's not a primary thing, but the schools that are deciding not to go for the junior cert, well, what's your feeling on that? Now, if it's putting you on the spot, that's absolutely
Oh,
fine.
no.
But what's your feeling on? No, we're not going to have a junior cert, because you also mentioned on Twitter the standardized testing, and that's kind of what I put it in an app I wanted to talk to you about, but we're gone well over time.
That's all right.
But standardized testing, the junior cert, certain schools getting rid of it. Discuss. What's your thoughts?
Oh yeah, get rid of it. I mean, I'd be unapologetic, and I would be well. I think any standardized testing is I mean, in its form is useless, really, to me. I mean, most research is pointing that way anyway. It's, I mean, people look. I'm skeptical of all research anyway. All research to me is biased, but I would think that even logically, you have to have a point to doing something, So, what does the junior cert really do anymore? It used to be a point where people would leave school. A lot of people would leave school after the junior cert, and the junior cert was something that you had to present to an employer, and that was a minimum qualification. But there are no jobs anymore, really, where you're asked for your junior cert.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in just there, just to be devil's advocate. The kickback from no junior cert, from the point that you're making, is there are one or two colleges in the UK that would require a junior cert. Now, I didn't know this at all. This is news to me.
Okay.
So if I'm wrong, so be it. But the feedback I'm getting from Twitter and from different groups that I be in is, no, the junior cert is still important for certain courses. So,
okay. So my argument, so my argument back to that is, if that's the road you're going to go down, well, then don't force everybody to do the junior cert. If people want to go to other countries where a junior cert or equivalent QQI level is needed, well, do the exams. I mean, if you want to be, if you want to become anything, there's usually some entry requirement, but you don't force the whole country to do, plumbing exams, or, because not everybody wants to be, do that job. So if you want to go to a course, if you want to open that door to you, then fine, like, apply and do those exams. They're not, because they're state exams, they don't necessarily have to happen in your own school. So I wouldn't see that as an obstacle. I think if your intention is to move on to the leaving cert, if that's what has to exist, there's really no advantage to doing the junior cert, really, except for exam practice, and you can do that without having a big state exam for it. And
you get rid of the junior cert, what are you left with?
Yeah, I mean, you're left with this mammoth of a leaving cert that we need to also get rid of. But I mean,
No. Get rid of it all. No, from a teacher's point of view. So again, I'll be devil's advocate. I put this out there. I put it out there. I said, wow, this is a huge thing. And I put it out to a group just to see the abuse that I'd get back, if any. I said, the first announcement that was made, and I put it on the group, I said, oh my God, this is a big deal. And 2 or 3 people got back to me saying, it's a ridiculous idea that teachers cannot be correcting their students' stuff. And one particular teacher said, but if I'm having a particularly good day with my students, or a lazy day, I can give them all good grades.
Mm-hmm.
That to me was an argument I didn't have an answer for, because I didn't understand how. I just didn't understand. I didn't understand it. When that was put to me, I kind of went, I don't know how to deal with it. How would you deal with it?
I never bought that argument. I'd heard it when they were talking about junior cert reform, and I know I'll be slaughtered, and possibly our entire conversation before we moved on to the junior cert, which is an area I shouldn't be talking about.
I don't look at that's fine, and I didn't want to put you on the spot, but
no, I don't mind. I mean, I unfortunately have too many opinions about things, and I mean, but I mean, that was my the first time I heard that argument that you heard. My first thing was like, but what happens when you go anywhere else? Like, what happens when you're in employment? You're going to be, when you're having your your what do they call it when you're getting your reviews from your
Or your
boss,
peer reviews,
your peer reviews or
your
whatever they
team
are.
reviews.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, who's doing that? Like, and if someone's having a bad day, you're not gonna, this is, I mean, I don't, you see, I think if once you take the high stakes out of something, like the junior cert is no longer a high stakes exam, then, that's fine. I mean, I can see the argument for the leaving cert because it is so high. I mean, the entire education system is sort of a journey to this little bottleneck, and then you can continue with education. It's weird. I mean, it doesn't work, but we have it, and
Yes.
and I suppose going back to when we were going back to what will happen after this crisis, maybe this is maybe it's holding a mirror to the education system, and maybe people will say, okay, the leaving cert is something that that needs to go in or needs to change to a different way.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for. Normally, my introduction, I say this aims to be a half an hour program, and as yet, we have yet to hit the half an hour, but we definitely haven't hit it this time. We've overshot. If you're a teacher, and if there's anything in the conversation that we've had today that interests you, the staff room or the CESI staff room aims to be a half an hour program. Chats. What's happening in your school? What are your staff doing? What are your colleagues doing? Maybe we can help you. If we can, go to www.cesi.ie, and there's a mailing list there. And my advice to you would be join that mailing list. If you have any questions, do please click on subscribe. Subscribe to the mailing list. There's about 2,000 teachers as of yesterday, I think, maybe just above, on the mailing list, who want to help you for no other reason than they want to help you. So if you're trying something, put it on the list. If it works for others, they'll say it. And if it doesn't work for others, you'll be sure that they'll say it then too. Simon Lewis, thank you very much for joining us today. And we're going to be chatting again.
Great. So thanks so much, Hassan.
Take it easy.
All the best. Bye-bye.